factor where there is a public health emergency, a growing crisis here in Trinidad and Tobago. And, well, I often wonder, is it contagious? Because it seems as though one person starts, another person starts, it just goes on and on. What am I speaking about? Noise pollution. And that's a conversation which I firmly believe has just, it's funny enough, it's not been highlighted enough. It's happening all the time, but it's not highlighted enough. And this morning, I'm pleased to welcome Citizens Against Noise Pollution Trinidad and Tobago Public Relations Officer, Ms. Tamara Chatar. She's with us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Shah. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am good. Thank you so much for having us today.
Well, thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully in a moment we could be joined by Ms. Lindy-Ann Bachoo. So as we start the interview, I'd just like to share some information of which you mentioned, which you highlighted at the Joint Select Committee meeting, that an EMA statement indicated that noise pollution was the #1 complaint at the EMA's hotline with the years 2018 to 2022, so over a 4-year period, receiving close to 1,000 calls over that 4-year period, 250 calls at least on average per year. That is incredible. But as you know, to start this conversation, has there been a complete disregard and a lack of enforcement for the existing noise pollution legislation in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, there has, and I'll tell you, but I cannot blame the TTPS fully. After examining the laws and seeing what they have to deal with, they don't have the proper equipment. We've sort of seen a kind of tennis ball thing over the years where the EMA passes the buck to the TTPS and vice versa. And it has become us getting to the bottom of really who is responsible for the different types of enforcement, whether it be bars, whether it be private homes, whether it be parties and fetes and so forth, because the issues are very complex one and very layered. Because we have so many types of different types of noise pollution. What's happening now, I can tell you, after coming out of the Joint Select Committee meeting, we did have preliminary a meeting with the senior part of the TTPS, and they are very, very keen on working with us to curb this issue. And we're actually quite relieved and I must say excited to work with them. We've got nothing but cooperation from the TTPS, but we realize, you know, where the shortfalls are.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we continue, and thank you for your response, I believe we are joined by Ms. Lindy-Ann Bachoo. All right, she's actually still joining the conversation, so she should be with us in a moment or two. But you mentioned that you cannot blame the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. There still seems to be some level of, I suppose, misunderstanding as to precisely who are those that are responsible. However, given that there isn't that level of clarity, is it that the existing legislation is not sufficient? Or is it that it's just sufficient, we just don't know?
Definitely, I feel that the legislation is not sufficient. It was written so many years ago when technology was, we didn't even have the types of sound equipment people are using right now. There's no, we don't have any legality where in terms of decibels of what you can play in a bar as opposed to a restaurant, as opposed to your homes. And it's really archaic when you look at the laws. Mm-hmm. I would let Lindy-Ann come in on this a little bit more as she's just joined us.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Bachoo. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for joining Ms. Chatar and myself. As she was just mentioning whether or not the existing legislation that deals with noise pollution, whether or not it is indeed strong enough, or whether or not it is just simply something that we do not understand. Ms. Chatar was mentioning that she believes it's it's archaic when you look at it. Could you expand on that, please?
Of course. What we have found over the years, both Tamara and myself, our personal struggles is that we had to get familiar with the law, and the average citizen in Trinidad and Tobago also has to go through that struggle because the laws are not generally posted or postulated out there for people to be aware. And one of the things that we would have found is that the laws themselves are vague. They're general. They do not deal with specific sources of noise. So, for instance, under the Summary and Offences Act, the noise, it's generated under a public nuisance, right? However, this does not allow for people who are being disturbed by commercial establishments from open air fetes, which is right now currently it's in the I think the Court of Appeal. Wild Goose Entertainment has taken the EMA to task, and it's in the courts, right? So they are basically saying that the EMA does not have the power to shut them down. So we have various sources of noise that is not covered because we are having a serious problem in Trinidad and Tobago, whereby the police are stating that their hands are tied and that this is not their purview. And the EMA is saying as well, residential noise does not fall under our remit either. So the laws themselves need to be adjusted to more developed country status because it's pretty archaic as it stands right now.
Well, I'm confused, ladies. If there was a complaint to be made about noise pollution and continued disturbances, do I make it to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service or to the EMA?
And that's the exact conundrum that faces the average citizen in our country. So the EMA's remit is industrial and commercial noise. So, for instance, establishments, bars, any type of industrial noise like that, it's supposed to be reported to them. However, residential noise, it is, again, postulated that it is supposed to be reported to the TTPS. We have the challenge of when we report such complaints to the TTPS that we are met with, that is not our job, that's not our responsibility. You all need to call the EMA to deal with something like that. And we are left, right, citizens are left with no one to turn to because we are not sure exactly who after hours, right, who we are supposed to contact, because a lot of the noise that happens here, it happens after hours. The EMA's office is from 8 a.m. to I think 4 p.m., right? And the TTPS is telling us, well, this is, they downright tell us that, they don't have the resources, they do not have the meters to deal with this problem. So citizens are just left to deal with it on their own.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Chatar, is it that reports of noise pollution, whether it be to the EMA or to the TTPS, because as mentioned, citizens are left to deal with it. It's up to them. Is that it's treated as a non-emergencies?
Well, the thing is, yes, to answer your question, yes, it is not an emergency, but it brings another thing to light and how this is a national health emergency now. This is affecting mental health. This is affecting physical health. A lot of invisible illnesses. We're not seeing how this affects people. Children that are studying is a huge issue. Right now we are getting hundreds of complaints, hundreds. And we're getting this weekly about neighbors that just they're just not educated about how this affects us physically. A funny thing is, when we were talking at TTPS, we were talking about how criminals are not born. Mm-hmm. And we had to say that, activists as well, we're not born. We're born from years of torture, years of abuse. And if something positive can come out of this, it would be something that our country has not seen in a long time, because they say they respond to us by saying this is our culture. And of course we love our music. We don't want to be against the party and but we want to have our basic right, our human right to peace in the sanctity of our homes. That is what we're asking for. We're not asking people not to be able to make money, but we also have to be able to survive and function at our jobs when we have to and make our own money as well. So if we have to put a dollar value on the effects of noise pollution and how much money we actually lose, if we're going to talk about a dollar value, it's going to be in the millions of dollars.
I think you've also raised an excellent point there to begin with, and that is the cost associated with it goes beyond just monetary. You've mentioned health as well. Ms. Bachoo, stress disorders, even instances of people having suicidal thoughts stemming from such torture and torment. It goes without little to no redress at all.
You're right. And I'm glad you brought up that, because we have testimonial evidence. For instance, we would have asked our members to document, right, their the effects that noise pollution has had on them. And I remember getting a particular testimonial from a young mother, and she would have been tortured for days by her neighbor, and there was no real help. And in her testimonial, she would have stated that when she went to visit the doctor, she had to be put on antidepressants because the noise was affecting her so much that she was afraid to go home, because there's this anxiety that used to grip her that she could not handle. And then you are not getting any response from the TTPS, and then the EMA is saying this is not their remit, and she's left to deal with this. So she was on medication. Her children and all was suffering. They had to sleep with headphones. No one except a victim of noise pollution knows what it is to sleep with an earplug or trying to sleep with a noise canceling headphones. And people will say, well, listen, you need to fix your home, right? You need to block off the sound. Well, it's time establishments as well as private citizens recognize their responsibility as well. These establishments in particular that have loud, amplifying devices also need to enclose their spaces, because one man's, business should not be disturbing the sleep and health of another citizen. And this is where we are finding ourselves at this point. I also remember another testimonial, again, of a mother. Her children started to suffer from stress and anxiety. We had another testimonial from a father who his son was actually kicked out of Zoom meetings when we were online last year, right? Because the noise was so much that the teacher actually told the parents that he is banned from participating in the classes because the feedback and the type of content that was playing in the background was inappropriate.
Through no fault of his own?
None. So he was deprived of part of his education for quite a while in terms of participation, and I think he was in primary school.
This is absolutely ridiculous, because so many statements, so many one-liners that both you ladies have mentioned this morning, the latest of which I wish I can just cut and paste all over the country, is the personal responsibility of private citizens. These private businesses should not be disturbing the lives of others, and it should not be, it's extremely unfortunate. I know of many instances throughout the nation as well in which residents have complained, and there, again, very little response. Citizens Against Noise Pollution, though, and I'm coming back to Ms. Chatar, you said that there's been an increase in the number of complaints, that we're seeing a continued rise. Is Citizens Against Noise Pollution, they're advocates, yes, they're activists, but are they powerless in trying to assist in dealing with these situations? Because though you've appeared for a joint select committee, what happens beyond just the conversations?
What we're doing is acting as a pressure group. I'll tell you, we did not think that we would ever come in front of the Joint Select Committee. We didn't think we would get a meeting with the TTPS. So what I think we have been doing is acting as a pressure group to give people hope that in numbers we can make a difference. We have been beaten, I'll tell you, mentally for years. like if we were powerless, like if we could not do something. But we are seeing by these small steps that people are listening. We are giving people hope, and the more that join us, the more that speak out about it, the more that actually make official police reports and they are investigated. Because it's not none of them are investigated. It's just that we know the TTPS is overwhelmed. We know that they don't have the resources. So we do not, it's not like we just go to the TTPS and say, oh, they're not helping us. But if we come in numbers and we get together and we actually speak out and document the evidence that it is there and this is a problem, I believe we're making a difference. And I mean, just us being here, Kitan, I thank you so much for having us, because you're giving us a voice. And by giving us a voice, more and more people are going to join and talk about their experiences. And that's the issue we have a lot of in this country. People are not open. We're criticized when we are open. There's a lot of heat on our backs, I could tell you, with Lindy-Ann and myself. You know, we get a lot of threats when we speak out in communities. We know what's happening in the country.
Yes.
But it allows us to have a voice. And if you cannot rest in your home, then how can you continue to exist?
Yes,
What is
precisely.
it? So
both you ladies are even risking yourselves in order to create a greater voice, so that it may actually, you know, be louder than the noise pollution that is produced by inconsiderate individuals. I would just only ask one final question, and that is simple. Generally speaking, I know you said that there are some cases that are investigated, but there are also experiences where, you know, okay, let them party, let them have a good time, it's just noise. Has that been a common response?
all the time, every day.
Yes,
Every day.
very much so.
And how does one even, I know the TTPS is stretched. I understand
yes.
resources are at this point in time very precious, and you have to utilize them as best as you can. But generally speaking, how does one even have a level of confidence in the TTPS if it is that simple matters such as these are not actually, at least if we go and see what is taking place, you know, is that often again something that is experienced by your membership?
Yeah, go ahead.
We actually do have very sometimes kind officers that reach out, and we would like to take the opportunity at this point, in particular, to commend Inspector Roger Alexander, as well as Mr. Zahir Ali, who reached out to us last week, because they are very much willing and supportive of our efforts to close this gap where citizens are basically, you know, being tortured. And at this point in time, we would like to tell our citizens, you need to make your reports. Join our Facebook group. It's Citizens Against Noise Pollution in Trinidad and Tobago. Go and make your reports, because these reports are going to be instrumental when there are investigations into the number of reports nationwide. And we would also like to advocate at this point in time for a change in legislation to give the TTPS the power that they need and the resources that they need to tackle this issue, as well as the EMA. We are not in this fight to fight down and local balance anyone. We want to work with all stakeholders because we recognize this is a national issue. The UN Frontiers report of last year, which is a report that deals with human health, would have actually stated that noise pollution is growing globally. And there are key people, there are key demographics that are affected by noise pollution, such as pregnant women, the elderly, children, and shift workers. Right? So Tamara hinted on something earlier, which was that noise pollution is becoming a health hazard. And it is, in fact, the truth, the absolute truth, because one might think that a party or a couple of hours is not going to hurt, but you can add up those hours. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, when the body needs to rest, when your clock needs to reset, when your children are at home trying to rest, the elderly who are sick and the infirm, and you add up those 10 hours that sometimes from 4 to 3 a.m. and all of these things that this music is blasting from, and you add up 10 hours, that's 30 hours one weekend, and you add that up for the month, it's coming to loss of productivity and ill health in this country. And we need to understand that, yes, we have a business, and yes, we have a right to play music in our own home, but that right does not override other citizens' constitutional rights.
Certainly. We've gone over time, but very quickly, one more time, Ms. Bachoo, could you just kindly remind citizens where they can make their reports?
Of course. For residential noise, please go to your nearest TTPS station, right? For anything that is deemed commercial or industrial noise, you have to report in the Environmental Management Authority. There's a WhatsApp number. You can also email them. You can call, right? But it is imperative, and I want citizens to understand, they have to make those reports. It may seem that it's not going to go anywhere, but it is, because at this point in time, Parliament is investigating nationwide how many reports that we have.
Yeah.
So for this issue to be tackled in a systematic manner, these reports must be made. Do not be afraid to make the reports.
I'm terrible at my timing, but very quickly, if possible, any one of you ladies, if there is a commercial business, privately owned but commercial in a residential area, who do you make the report to exactly? Because that's a difficulty as well.
That's also a difficulty which was brought up in the Joint Select Committee as well, because there are businesses that are operating in mixed areas.
Yeah.
But if it is commercial, it still goes to the EMA.
Understood.
At this point in time, yeah. But
Citizens...
the short-term measure should be running to the TTPS, because the EMA has no after-hours hotline.
Yeah.
So they are more long-term in dealing with the problem rather than getting immediate relief. And that's the conundrum we have right now.
Well, for more information and to share your experiences, you can go to Citizens Against Noise Pollution, TT, their social media page, and you can join that group. Have your voice heard, because honestly, as much as you can, shouting over the noise, trying to get your voice across, it's only going to lead to more health crisis. But at this time, Ms. Lindy-Ann Bachoo, Ms. Tamara Chatar, thank you very much for joining me this morning on AM Prime, and I can only hope that this is just one part to greater solutions to come.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much, ladies.